We begin today with the topic of medical gas pipeline system. This is going to be the scheme of presentation. We will see what are the bit of introduction. We'll see some of the basics. More so because in our day-to-day work, we never come across the technical requirements of the system. So let us have a look at that. Some of the planning parameters, the installation peculiarities, and the statutory requirements. So this is what we are going to cover. And the quality standards. Ultimately, every accreditation system or every accreditation assessment will also look at the medical gas pipeline system as well. Okay. So the medical gases are vital life support measures that we have in the hospitals, and they have no substitute. So if you need gas, you need gas. There is no option. This is an engineering subsystem, and this is part of the reason why a lot of us who are the healthcare professionals, the doctors or the nurses, do not come into the nitty-gritties of this system, because this is an engineering subsystem, much like the HVAC system or the heating, ventilation, and the air conditioning system that we have in the hospitals. So oxygen therapy was introduced in the year 1867, and the first piped gas supply system was installed in St. Mary's Hospital in London in 1935. So this is a little bit of history. The medical gas pipeline system, or MGPS as it is called, is designed to provide safe and effective method of delivering the required medical gas from the source of supply through a pipeline system to the patient via a terminal unit. So there is a source, which can be cylinders or which can be a plant. Then there is a pipeline system, which also has integrated alarms. And then there is a terminal unit, which is installed next to the bed of the patient, and from where the patient draws the gas. Each medical gas must be supplied from a separate system, and it is essential that all parts of each system are gas specific to ensure that there is no possibility of cross connection. I think it is easy to understand that a cross connection can lead to major catastrophe in the hospital, or it will invariably be a sentinel event. During the installation stage, extensive tests are required to be carried out to verify that there is no cross connection, and there are specific tests which have been recommended in the guidelines, and we will see what those guidelines are. Then medical gas pipeline system should not be used to supply the pathology department and the general workshop or the mechanical services. So if you need gas in the laundry, or if you need gas in the kitchen, or if you need gas elsewhere in the hospital other than for patient requirement, that system has to be a separate system than the one which is supplying medical gases. So some terms which are common and which we all see in our, which we hear in our day-to-day work. Number one is manifold. So this is a device for connecting one or more gas cylinders to a central pipeline system for a specific gas. So a manifold for oxygen is separate, a manifold for nitrous oxide is separate, and manifold for any other gas. For example, carbon dioxide, if you are supplying it on a pipeline, then it will be different. Medical gases are any gaseous substance meeting the medical purity standards and has the application in the medical environment. Airway pressure is the pressure at the specific points in the patient's airway. AGSS is what is called as the anesthetic gases scavenging system. So this is useful in the operation theaters where the patient is consuming the anesthetic gases as well as the medical gases, and then he is breathing out. So these gases which are expired, or the gases which are released by the patient, they accumulate in the OT environment, and they are a fire hazard. So there is a system which connects to the breathing circuit, and then it takes away the gases away from the operation theater. It doesn't allow them to get accumulated in the OT environment. So therefore, this is required, and it is also part of the medical gas pipeline system called, and this is called AGSS, anesthetic gases scavenging system. It scavenges the anesthetic gases. Next are the cylinders, and these are color-coded cylindrical tanks containing a specific medical gas. There is also a term called index safety system. So this index safety system is pin and geometric type. We will see some of the pictures to understand what it is. It is safety indexed coding system, which basically means that you cannot couple or you cannot attach a particular two couplers of a particular gas to a different gas couplers. So they are specific to, so the coupler for the oxygen will be a specific coupler, for the nitrous oxide it will be specific, and for vacuum it will be specific. But we'll see these pictures as well. So AGSS is a system which is connected to the exhaust port of an anesthetic workstation for the purpose of conveying expired or the excess anesthetic gases to an appropriate place of discharge. So this is typically released in the environment outside the OT, but it should not be allowed to accumulate in the OT environment. Flow meters are the devices that measure the flow of gas or gas mixtures. And medical air is a clean compressed air that can be used for patients' ventilation. Brazing is a method of joining metal pipes, the copper pipes. So here what we are seeing is, we are seeing the terms which are used in medical gas pipeline system, either in the installation or in its functioning. So these are the medical gases, or these are the components, or these are the kind of gases that are generally conveyed in the medical gas pipeline system. So we have air, we have nitrous oxide, we have oxygen, we have piped vacuum, we can also have piped nitrogen. Then there is something known as entonox, which is a mixture of oxygen and the nitrogen. Sorry, it is not nitrous oxide, it is nitrogen. Then the ethylene oxide, the carbon dioxide, and AGSS. So these are the gases which can be part of the medical gas pipeline system. Typically in a hospital you have air, nitrous oxide, oxygen, and vacuum only. The other installations are based on the requirements. Carbon dioxide requirement is typically not so much in most hospitals, except where there is a lot of laparoscopy work is happening. So in those, except for those sectors, you may not have a piped supply of carbon dioxide. Similarly, the anesthetic gases scavenging system is not very commonly installed. However, this is an important part of the medical gas pipeline system. So some of the units that we need to understand. So kPa is kilopascal. When we say 1 bar, it is equal to 1 atmospheric pressure, which is 760 millimeter of mercury. So these terms are used when we are measuring the pressure of various gases. Then we have a unit called PSI, pounds per square inch. I'm sure all of us know about it. 1 kilopascal is equal to 7.5 millimeter of mercury. 1 millimeter of mercury pressure is equal to 1.36 centimeter of water pressure, or 0.133 kilopascal, or 0.193 pounds per square inch. These conversions are sometimes required. Of course, I'm sure that all of us are not using these conversions every day, but if you are involved in testing the medical gas pipeline system, or if you are involved in maintaining a medical gas pipeline system, then it is important that we know these conversions. Okay, so a medical gas pipeline system typically will have a source, which can be a generating unit, or it can be a cylinder-based supply point. So this becomes a source, and it is always gas specific. It is always service specific. So you have a separate source for vacuum, separate for nitrous oxide, and it is easy to understand. And then this requires a 100% backup, and then it also must have some amount of reserve. Then there is a distribution network, which is basically a copper pipeline network. and it's a medical grade copper. We will see what standards applies to it. Then we need dispensing units. So these dispensing units are essentially terminal wall units, which we normally see in the ICUs and the OT, or we may have pendants, which are normally seen in the operation theaters. Then we have the alarm systems, which are basically for warning us about drop in pressure. So they are pressure monitoring devices. And then we have safety devices, which will involve the flow meters or the gas regulators, isolation valves, and safety valves. So these are the planning parameters. Typically, 20% of beds in the hospital should have a medical gas pipeline system. That means 20% of beds should have the gases supplied through this pipeline system. Now, this is for the wards. In the ICUs, obviously, a lot of hospitals have all the beds. You can have 50% depending on what is your requirement. The number of beds that should be supplied with this medical gas pipeline system depends on the type of hospital. So if you are more critical care, if you are more trauma, if you are more acute care hospital, then you will need more beds with this service. If you, the other types may not have such a requirement. Similarly, the workload as to how many patients you typically serve, and then the type of ward. So HDU will have less requirement than the ICU, and a super specialty ICU will invariably have all the beds supplied with this particular system. The expansion capacity must exist. This is an important point because a lot of times in the hospital where I have worked and hospitals where I have seen, the requirement of medical gas service beds will typically increase. It is very rarely it happens that you have the requirement of the serviced beds coming down. So you must always have the capacity for expansion. The plant itself or the sources itself are always installed outside the hospital building, and they have statutory requirements of maintaining safety. So those safety norms will ensure that your gas supply system is always outside the hospital. These are the gas flow rates and pressures. So the oxygen is typically supplied at the rate of 40 liters per minute. And the pressure at the terminal unit. Terminal unit means where the unit next to the patient's bed or on the bedside, where the patient's device or the ventilator or whatever device he is using is connected. The nitrous oxide is supplied at 15 liters per minute and the pressure is 4 bar. The medical air is supplied at 50 liters per minute and the pressure is 4 bar. Then we also have a variety of pressurized air called surgical air, which is essentially for operating pneumatic instruments. Of course, in the modern instrumentation, the pneumatically operated instruments are drastically reduced in number. In good old days, the drills typically were operated by the surgical air, so it was a common feature. Nowadays, I don't see this being implemented in many places. The surgical air is supplied at 7 bar pressure and the flow rate is 250 liters per minute. The vacuum is maintained at 0.53 bar. The vacuum at a higher pressure will create problems. It may cause injuries. So this is the pressure at which it should be maintained. The pressure monitoring devices should be tuned or should be programmed or should be designed in such a way that they trigger an alarm whenever the pressure drops below these limits for the gases and whenever the pressure rises or falls below this limit for the vacuum. So these are the peculiarities of installation. A shortest pipeline run is most economical because copper is extremely expensive metal. So if you are installing copper pipeline, the medical grade copper is even more expensive. So that is why the shortest pipeline run is important. All pipes to be installed either vertically or horizontally. So we typically do not have a diagonally running pipeline. These are supported suitably at periodic intervals. So you have plastic or the PVC holders which hold the pipeline. And this installation is almost always open. So you can see the pipeline running, except where it is passing through a wall. The pipeline should be visible throughout its run. As far as possible, it should be an open installation. I just explained that. The isolation of different areas should be possible. So whenever the pipelines are being installed, there have to be the isolation valves which are installed at appropriate places so that you can cut off the gas supply of a particular area in the hospital. Each pipeline should be identified by a color-coded band painted at periodic intervals. We'll see what are the color codes that are applicable, and this also is a point of confusion a lot of times. Some more issues related with the installation. So whenever we are installing the pipes, or whenever we are getting these pipes installed from a company or from a person who's doing it, we must ensure that the pipes are braced together and they are not soldered or they are not joined through plumbing. A plumbing joint is which is uses a thread and a socket. So typically the water pipelines in our houses are plumbed. They are plumbed. So you have a thread and a socket through which using which the pipe is joined. Then we can have soldering, and whenever you see the air conditioning gas lines being installed, you would see soldering being done. Bracing is a method. I've shown a picture here. The bracing is a method where the part of the pipe goes inside the continuing pipe, making a male-female kind of a joint, and the gap between the two pipes is filled using a bracing compound. For the medical gas pipeline system, it is specific that the bracing compound has to be a copper phosphorus bracing compound and no other material that is used for bracing. This is important because this will become a safety issue later on when the medical gas pipeline system comes in use. All the pipelines, the entire pipeline system, when it is installed, it is tested using the nitrogen, and this nitrogen is pressurized inside the pipeline. So you fill the nitrogen, the pipeline, seal the pipeline and fill it with nitrogen at a certain pressure, leave it for let us say 24 hours, and then you see whether the pressure has dropped. So if it has dropped, then obviously there is a leakage somewhere. So this is the nitrogen pressure test which is carried out. Then the purging has to be done after the joints have been made, which essentially is to remove any gases which are generated during the process of bracing. They should not be inside the pipeline. So this purging is required. And then pressure testing, I have just explained it. So if the dry nitrogen is filled at a pressure of 10 bar and it is left for 24 hours, and then the pressure is measured. So if the pressure is dropped, then obviously there is a leakage. This is typically a layout of the medical gas pipeline system. So you have a central system and a pipeline going to each floor. At each floor, there at the entry of the pipe, there is an isolation valve, so you can isolate that particular floor from the gas supply. These are the qualitative parameters. So for the medical air, these parameters are necessary. For all the medical gases, the parameters are defined separately. I'm not covering it here because they are part of the medical gas specifications and part of Indian pharmacopoeia or British or US pharmacopoeia, whichever is being used. For the medical gases, purity standards are like this. The oxygen has to be 20.9% plus minus 1%. The nitrogen has to be 78% by inference, which means you measure other gases and reduce and deduct to calculate the amount of nitrogen. Then there has to be free from any visible particulate matter. The water content has to be less than 0.095 milligram per liter at a pressure of minus 40 degrees at 1 bar. Sorry, this is equivalent to a dew point at minus 40 degrees at 1 bar. Then carbon monoxide content cannot be more than 5 ppm, that is 5 parts per million, volume by volume. The carbon dioxide cannot be more than 500 ppm, volume by volume. The oil content, either in the form of a mist or the droplet, has to be less than 0.5 milligram per cubic meter of gas. And then there has to be no smell or no odor in the medical air. So these are the parameters for medical air. The medical gases have to be medical grade gases, all other gases. So whether it is oxygen or the nitrous oxide or the carbon dioxide, they have to be medical grade. The audio-visual alarms are required to be installed, and these are centrally installed at the medical gas pipeline system plant, and then they are also installed at multiple places across the hospital. Independent power supply should be there for all the alarms without the possibility of switching off. So wherever you have an alarm system installed, alarm system typically will require a power supply, and the most common way is that you install a plug point next to the alarm box and then you put the plug there. Well, it's a good method, but the possibility that the plug will be taken out for connecting some other electronic equipment or a device is something that can become a safety issue. Therefore, the switch sockets of the alarm system of medical gas pipeline must always be secured so that the plug cannot be taken out, or the wiring should be such that the plug that it cannot be disconnected. So this is an important point. The alarms will typically have three levels. So normal is green LED light. The low pressure will be shown as the yellow, and the high pressure will be shown as the red. Now the requirement is to have an audio visual alarm. So there has to be an audio component which will sound whenever the pressure drops or it crosses the upper limit. Pressure should ideally be displayed in the digital form using the LCD panel and not using the dials, because sometimes it is difficult to read dials. Sometimes it is also that the dials may not show the correct reading. So the recommendation is that you should have a digital display. The numbers should be visible in an LCD panel. Of course, having said that, I am aware that a lot of hospitals have a dial-based system, which is very commonly installed. In such situations, it is important for us to ensure that the dial systems are working at all times. So these are the color codes. I'm sure all of us are aware, but just to kind of complete our presentation. So this is the color code for various gases. Oxygen comes in a black cylinder with a white top. The nitrous oxide comes in a blue cylinder, and the carbon dioxide comes in a gray colored cylinder. These are the types of cylinders we have. So we have a type D cylinder, which is close to 5 feet high heavy cylinder. It is called a bulk supply cylinder. Then we have a type C cylinder, which is 1246 liter. Type B is 623 liter of cylinder. And type AA are the smaller cylinders of 200 liters or 300 liters. They are portable cylinders and are attached with various machines or equipment. These are the color codes for pipeline system. Now, color codes can be the HTM, the Health Technical Manual. It's a UK standard, so you can have HTM color codes, or you can have NFPA, the National Fire Protection Agency. This is the NFPA color code, is a US color code system. In our country, we do not have a law which says that this color code should be followed. Neither the accreditation system like the NABH gives any color code. So you can follow any of the color codes. But it is a good idea that you follow one of these two color codes, even though the possibility that you have your own color code also exists. If you have your own color code, please define it very well in your policies. The staff at the MGPS and many other people should be fully aware as to what color code means which particular gas. And this is a problem, or this is an area which I see in a lot of our hospitals in India, that they have their own color codes because somebody who is installing, the technician or someone who supplied the gas pipeline system, they give their own color codes. Please insist on the standardized color code, then the chances of going wrong are very, very less. However, having said that, whatever color code you have installed, please display it at multiple places so that there is no cross connection. So these are the color codes in the HTM system. In the HTM method of color coding, or in the HTM color code, all the gas containing pipes will be yellow. The air or vacuum containing pipe will be sky blue. And then you have bands painted at every 1 meter interval. So oxygen gas pipeline will be a yellow colored pipe with white band, white 1 inch wide white band painted every meter of the length of the running length of the pipe. Then we have a nitrous oxide. So here you have yellow colored pipe with a blue band, nitrous and oxygen mix. So the yellow pipe with 50-50, the white and blue band. The medical air, as I said, air and vacuum will have a blue colored pipeline. So the pipeline is blue, and for medical air, the color is white and black band. Now, in the medical air, you have to write a word medical air here. There is very little color code difference, or there is no color code difference between medical air and the surgical air in the HTM system. So you write MA for medical air and SA for surgical air. Then you have a vacuum, which is a blue color pipe with a yellow band. So just to remind, these bands are painted at every meter in the running length in the hospital. For the AGSS, you need a yellow colored pipeline with a yellow and blue band. Then for the helium oxygen mixture, these are specialized requirements, not commonly used in many hospitals. So this is the color code. For the surgical nitrogen, this is the color code, blue with the blue pipe with the black band. The exhaust lines, wherever they are installed, they will have only a yellow pipeline without any color code band, and the carbon dioxide will have a gray colored band in the yellow pipe. So if you look at it again, the color codes are the color codes of the color code of the cylinders. So it matches. So oxygen cylinder is white top, so white for the oxygen. Nitrous oxide is a blue cylinder, so it is blue. The carbon dioxide is a gray cylinder, so therefore gray. And all others are the combinations. The NFPA color codes are kind of little simpler in nature, and these are the color codes for the oxygen: green, medical air; yellow, nitrous oxide; blue, medical vacuum; white, and so on. So you are free to follow any color code, but once you have decided that you will follow a particular color code, the entire hospital pipeline system has to be that same color code. Then we have the terminal units, which are typically installed in a bed head panel. So you have a panel which are installed on the head, on the wall near the head end of the bed. It has the gas outlets. It also has the power outlets, and there can be many other things. For example, a reading light, a call switch, backup power supply. So there can be multiple other things that can be installed in a bedhead unit. But the essential components are the power supply and the gas outlets. Sometimes these bedhead panels also have provisions to attach or to mount the infusion pumps or the reading light. So these are the variations. Then, or you can have a trunking system where there is a running panel along the wall of the ICU or the ward, and at multiple places you have the power outlets and the gas outlets. So it can be a bedhead panel or a trunking system. Then you have the pendants. Now these pendants can be a rigid pendant, something like what you see here, a white pendant, a white colored installation in the ceiling, or you can have an installation like this where you have a dispensing point on the ceiling and then the pipes drop down from there, or you can have a rigid retractable pendant. I'll show you a picture in the next slide. Or you can have a swivel arm, kind of a single arm or a double arm pendant. So these pictures are there. There are multiple other variations of these pendants which are available in the market, essentially to make using the gases in a convenient manner, because these pendants combine many other services, the power supply, the gases, and many other things. So here is an example of a retractable, rigid retractable. So you have something like this kind of a installation, But in that installation, there is a lower portion which can move upwards or downwards. So this makes it a little more convenient. Now, certain specifications for the or certain details for the various gases. So oxygen can be supplied using a cylinder, or it can be supplied using a liquid oxygen plant. So if you have a liquid oxygen plant, then this must have a evaporator and evaporator, a tank and a vaporizer where the liquid is converted into gas form. Then it needs a control assembly which will ensure that the supply is always at 4 bar and not higher or lower. So these are the alarm system in the liquid oxygen plant. You have a liquid flow alarm. So typically when the liquid gets into the gas pipeline or the gas part of the pipeline, the second alarm system is, or second stage is for the liquid oxygen depleting. Third is switch to standby supply, and fourth is a pressure pressure fault. So these are the 4-stage alarm system that is. These are all standard components of the liquid oxygen plant. However, we just need to know these. Then there will be a standby tank, which is typically a second tank, and then this the quantum of supply arrangement depends on the source of the supply and the reliability. So if you have a source which is located far away from you, you are in a remote area, it is not easy for you to get frequent supplies, then it will be a good idea to have a standby tank as well. So this is a graphical representation of the system. So you have a tank, you have a safety valve in the control mechanism, and then you have a vaporizer where the gas, where the liquid is converted to gas and supplied. 1 liter of liquid oxygen gives 860 liters of oxygen. So I think someone had asked a question in the beginning when I was asking who all are managing the medical gas system in your hospitals. So this is the calculation formula. So 1 liter of of liquid oxygen will give you 860 liters of gaseous oxygen. So you can use this to calculate your requirement and your consumption. Nitrous oxide is supplied using the bulk D-type cylinders, and it can also be supplied using a smaller cylinders depending on your consumption. It is supplied at 4 bar. This we have covered earlier also. Medical air is supplied at 4 bar, and the compressor should be fully backed up. So in the medical air compressor is always 100% backed up. You have 2 air compressors, and they are auto switched. So when one stops or one is not working, or when it switches automatically. The surgical air is for driving pneumatic instruments, for example drills, and it is supplied to 7 bars. We've covered that. AGSS, or the anesthetic gases scavenging system, is required because the anesthetic gases are source of pollution and fire hazard inside the OT. There are 5 methods of disposal for these gases. So you can have 5 different kinds of 5 variations in the AGSS system. So you have a high vacuum dual use. So it is a common vacuum system which is used for your vacuum requirements as well as for the for removing the anesthetic gases. Then you can have a high vacuum dedicated, which is the dedicated system only to remove the anesthetic gases. You can have a low vacuum dedicated, and then you can have a venturi system which is powered by compressed air other than the medical air supply, and you can have a passive system, which means you have a standard ventilation, or you use the ventilation system of the OT to get rid of the anesthetic gases which accumulate in the operation theatre. These are the post-installation tests which are required, and typically any company which is installing this equipment should give you a written confirmation that these tests have been carried out. So once I share the presentation, you can have a list made, and please ensure that these tests are done. It is a good idea to ensure that you witness that these tests are being or have been done. These are the applicable standards, and with this we come to close to the end of this presentation. So for the distributing pipeline system, For the copper, the standard applicable standard is ASTM B81900 of 2002. The fittings are as per this standard, so BSEN 1254. Copper to copper joints, which are using the silver copper phosphorus brazing alloy. The standard for alloy is this. Pipeline isolation and lockable line valve, the standard applicable is the HTM 2022 or EN 737 or NFPA 999. These are equivalent. Rigid retractable pendant have to be as per these standards. The terminal outlet have to be PB type compatible, and there are specific requirements. If you look at NFPA or the HTM guidelines, you will get those standards. So these are some of the remaining ones, and with this we come to the applicable rules and regulations. So gas cylinder rules and static and mobile pressure vessel unfired rules 1981. These are the rules which are applicable. Under the gas cylinder rules, please insist that your gas supplier gives you a confirmation that all the cylinders that he is supplying have been hydrostatically tested. This testing is required every 3 years, and he has to maintain a certificate. This is a binding legal requirement on the part of the supplier, and you should ask for it. Similarly, if you are installing a vacuum chamber, or if you are installing a compressed air chamber, or if you have a liquid oxygen plant, the second, that is the static and mobile pressure vessel rules are applicable to you, and please ensure that you follow all these safety requirements as applicable under these rules. So as we have seen, the devil is in details, and with this, thank you very much. If there are questions, I'll be happy to take them. I'm closing the presentation. So if there are questions, then they can be asked.
Sir, is there any safety precautions to be carried off for the staffs who are working in the medical gas? Any specific safety precautions?
For the people who are working in the gas plant, they have to use ear mufflers, and they should be audiometrically tested once in a year. That is number one. Number two, there can be no source of fire anywhere near the medical gas pipeline system. This, I think, should be logical to understand. Number three, all the alarms should be working at all times. This is a common problem. A lot of times you have a situation where the alarms may not be working, or if they are working, somebody has just unplugged those alarms. That is the reason why I have recommended that the power supply to the alarms should be such that it cannot be disconnected easily. So either you have a fixed power supply where there is no plug, or you have the plug and the switch secured inside a locked box, so that people cannot just disconnect the power supply. These are the important requirements, and otherwise the system is actually very, it's not very complex. It can be run very comfortably and easily. Any more questions?
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Any more questions? No more questions? Okay then. So thank you very much, and the presentation will be shared with everyone who has asked for the presentation. The video will be uploaded. We have uploaded past videos. I think one or two are still left, including this one. So we will upload the remaining videos in maybe next 2 days' time. So thank you very much, and thank you for joining us. We meet again next Saturday. All the best.